As a parent, what do you feel like you did in those seasons, that were really critical in their growth, or in those challenges? How did you meet those together as a couple?
For me, when they were the crosstown age was one of the hardest with us with Cade. Cade was an easy baby. He was great until about first grade, and we started seeing a difference in him. And at first we thought he was gifted, like everybody thinks their child's gifted. But when he started reading the road signs at 3, and then in first grade was reading 5th grade books, and I asked him in first grade, what's your favorite part of school? Because he was at Memorial Park. And he goes, reading groups. And I said, why? And I said, because I go in the corner and I read by myself. I knew something wasn't right. So at first we went the whole, let's get him tested for gifted and all that stuff. And school wasn't working out, so perfect for us was bringing him home. And I'll tell you, before that, I would never homeschool type person. I told people there's no way. I'm a teacher by trade. Once they get into school, I'm going back to work, all this other stuff. But it was right for us, and it's not right for everybody, I know that. But for us, bringing him home was perfect. And then when we finally went to a psychologist and got some help, he was on medication for a few years, ADD. I'm not anti-medication, but we realized he was on the Asperger's syndrome. And he is very high functioning, but it really helped. But those crosstown years were really tough. And I think for us, the biggest thing was being willing to ask for outside help. And we had people that were willing to take the kids when they were, the Linvilles have watched our kids forever, And that's another.
Our kids too.
Yeah. And that's another thing that really helped was we would give them to the Linvilles for a weekend and take a weekend just for us. And that was from the time Cade was 6 months old. Even when they were babies, we would get away for just us together. And that's when Sadie was the hard baby. She had medical issues. But as soon as she got to past about 5, she was as easy as pie.
Yeah.
Once she learned how to talk. Yeah, she didn't talk till after she was 3. She didn't walk till 18 months. So she was delayed. So we were dealing with all her delays and dealing with his ADD, Asperger, brain goes crazy type things. So it was all one. And we just, as a couple, prayed a lot, and I cried, and why can't we handle this on our own? And then finally didn't feel guilty asking for help. And got the help we needed outside of ourselves. It doesn't discount prayer, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing wrong with going to a psychologist. There's nothing wrong with, Kate did a program called Brain Balance. Great for him. There's nothing wrong with, in that season, needing the medication. He needed it.
This is an unfair question, so tell me just to be quiet if it is. But one of the things that we noticed when we started talking to families and doing marriage counseling with couples is there is so much we don't want the world to know what we're going through. And I call it shame, but maybe it's another word too. But why do you think, as ministry couple and as a couple that's gone through this and seen that it's important to ask others for help, why do you think this is such a big deal that we can't seem to talk about what's going on within our home, whether it's marital, whether it's children, parenting? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I get all kinds of opinions on that. I think, you know how it is. You fall in love, you get married, you start having kids, and it's wonderful. And then they get to this age, and it gets kind of crazy. And life gets really, really busy really fast. You've got more than one especially. And a lot of times couples don't take time out to nurture the relationship together. We all know it's good to date your spouse, but the practicality of it is really hard to do that. On an income where I'm at a church and she stay at home, well, how do we go out to eat in a movie find a babysitter? We can't spend $50, $60, $70 a week on a date. And so we had to figure out a way to make that work.
And Linville's helped a lot.
But so we had small group that met once a week, and we had babysitting for that. Let's just go ahead and meet an hour ahead of time, have a coffee date. It's not that expensive. The importance of just a weekly connect, eyeball-to-eyeball conversation with the spouse, if for no other reason to go through the calendar to make sure you're on the same page, but really to try to get to the heart. And that's so important because if you know who you are and what you're about, that's really what you're trying to raise the kids to do anyhow, isn't it? I mean, we want, so many people get caught up in the scholarships or the travel team or the dance recital and all these things that are good, but their life all of a sudden becomes all about that. And we live in a world where that's championed. And you can scrap all that away. I don't care if my kid's the best plumber or the best research scientist. I want them to know who they are and what they're about. And it better be coming from us, and for us it's grounded in the Lord. And so we talk about developing what I call rhythms and boundaries and traditions. And the more you get that established in your house, the better opportunity they're gonna see it lived out and know who they are and what they're about. And so we have all kinds of examples with rhythms and boundaries and traditions.
And one
Can you
thing
give
that
us
has
some?
really helped us
Yeah.
establish those and work with those
Sure.
is we've made our kids say no to activities. Sadie would do everything she possibly could and be out there. And she was in dance for a long time, but that's all she did. And once she started playing volleyball and stuff, we told her you can play volleyball or you can dance. You can't do both. It's a choice. And she chose volleyball, thank goodness, because I coached. But, and she wanted to coach upward basketball last year. And there's a homeschool basketball team. We're like, you can either coach upward or you can play basketball, but you can't do both. We're not running that much. We're gonna have some evenings at home together as a family. So you choose. And we have kids, especially I don't know about public school, I'm sure they're just as busy, but in the homeschool community, that let their kids do every activity under the sun, and they live in their car. They're going everywhere, and they're never home. So we've made our kids say no to things. Now, Cade, we've made say yes to things. He would stay home and not do anything if he didn't make it. So there's some things I've made him go do. But there's just some, Sadie still loves to dance, and she still talks about wanting to do dance, and we said, you can't do that. When you're an adult, you can't do it all. You have to say no to good things. Sorry. And so that's...
Some of the rhythms that I call the main five for us. Now, it might be different for you guys, but it's schoolwork, chores, exercise, devotions, and then the coveted electronic time. And so we're always coming back to these things. We want school and studying to be a priority for obvious reasons. We want chores because we want them to learn how to be hard workers. We want exercise and fitness to be part of their life because this country has a problem with fitness and obesity and all these things. We want the obviously the discipling or the devotional time to be a priority, so they learn how to do that on their own. It's not our faith; it's theirs developing. And then electronic time, we could talk all week on that one, because everybody's got different ideas, and that's uncharted territory. It's like a new frontier with what's acceptable and what's not. And so every couple months, we'll come back to these things, because even individually, we'll drift. Well, I haven't cracked my Bible open in 2 weeks. Well, why is that? If I'm getting busy with life, well, I need to get back to that. I need to have a family to hold us accountable. Why is it I haven't worked out in 2 weeks, 3 weeks? We need to always... And as the dad, it's hard because the family meetings in my mind are a lot better than what they really play out to be. But it's important to keep coming back because we will instinctively drift towards our sinful nature. And those are priorities for us: school, chores, exercise, and devotions, and electronic time.
When Dad says, let's go to Dairy Queen, they all know, oh, it's going to have a family meeting.
But those are, for some of you guys, it might be a different category in there, but those are the five we tend to come back to a lot. So those are some of the rhythms, and we have boundaries like most of you do with regard to bedtime, amount of TV, what else
Could you, I don't know if you could do a blog for us, or just take a picture of your chore chart, or however your system on
Chore charts have never
how,
worked for me.
or
I'll be honest with you.
whatever
I write
system.
down, and even right now, we're kind of away from it. It's better, sometimes are better than others, but I write down on Mondays, you dust.
Okay.
On Tuesdays, but I don't mark it off. I just tell them to do it.
Okay.
Chore charts, if he was home all day and I was out working, chore charts would be all over the house. With me home, I I just don't keep up with it very well. I'm
Different
not a
things.
very good chart person.
But every day is something different,
Yeah.
and everyone does the same,
Mhm.
like you, okay,
Yeah, like Sadie does the main floor, Kate does upstairs and the basement.
okay.
Sadie does the main four floors, Kate does upstairs and basement. And you're like, what do you do? Well, I do a lot. You know, they each have a bathroom they have to clean. They each, you know, those kind of things.
Different things work for different families, and so while short charts might work for some, or they might have variations along, we've had a bunch of different ones. And sometimes they work for a little while, sometimes they don't. The problem is sometimes, just like with devotions or journaling, well, we tried that, it just didn't work. Well, try something else. Keep trying, figure out what works, or maybe in this season it didn't work, and now it will work. To say, well, I don't journal, or I don't like to crack my back, I hate reading. Well, try a different way. There's so many, like right now with the kids, we're doing devotionals on the iPad because there's tons of video devotionals, and that's the language they speak anyhow. Why not watch a 2 or 3 or 5 minute video and then look at the verse and talk about it? It's just easier.
And you do that at the same time every day, or do you mix
Try
that
to,
up?
and again,
Yeah,
we go through,
right.
sometimes a couple weeks go by, and man, we gotta get back to this. Well, whose job is that? Is it their job, or is it my job?
Right.
If you're a dad or husband that says, I really struggle with praying with my wife, and I know you can all relate to that, guys, because I'm a pastor, I struggle with praying with my wife. And it's just hard, because we look at things differently, we speak differently, and it's hard to, and so it's easy to just say, well, we just don't do that very often. But when we die and we're held accountable, and the Lord says, well, how's your prayer life? Well, it just didn't work out that well. Wow. He's going to look to the guy and say, well, how did you do leading that? And I want to be able to say, we tried this, and this is what worked for us. And so it's hard. You know, at the end of the day, you're tired, you want to go to bed. In the morning, you got to get out and get to work, and it's just never a good time. And we found for us, before I leave in the morning, we'll huddle up in the living room and make a circle and pray. It might be 30 seconds, it might be 3 minutes, but it's not about just doing it and checking off the list. It's about let's group here and talk about what we're doing here for the day, who we are and what we're about. And it's just hard, but it's important. And so, yeah, that's some of the stuff we...
And then traditions, yeah, we've gone on long enough.
Well, we got a few more minutes. Again, lots of different parents here with different ages of children, but because we're focused on that crosstown age child, you've given us some really good nuggets already, so I don't want to make it sound like you haven't. But what would be the one thing, if we were to emphasize one take-home homework assignment for us as parents with that age of child, what would you give us by way of a challenge? Maybe it could be for each, the husband and the wife, or we have some single parents here, we have some grandparents raising kids. What can we be doing? Give us a challenge.
Go ahead.
It's what I was talking about earlier, is for you guys as couples to connect weekly, even if it's just for a half hour, and make sure you know what you're about.
Connect without the kids around.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you can't get away, tell them we call it couch time. We used to call it couch time, where if we were sitting on a couch talking, they weren't allowed to interrupt us. They had to be in the room playing, they had to be doing something else. They just were not allowed. And the first few times it was really hard for them. But once they realized we were having couch time, they wouldn't interrupt us. And so if we couldn't get away where a babysitter or send them to grandma and grandpa's or whatever, you at least have a time where they're not allowed to come in and interrupt you.
So
And if they're crosstown age, they should understand that.
my challenge is that you'll leave here today, and I say, that was nice, they were good, that was fun, but you'll say, what date can we get on the calendar this week, just so we can get together and talk about how we're gonna make this work. Otherwise, it won't happen. You know, all of a sudden, maybe 3-4 weeks from now, we were gonna do that, we just didn't. So the challenge is, get together today and see when can we get on the calendar this week and talk about who we are, what we're about, and how we can make this work with the kids in a regular way, and go with it that way.
That's fantastic.
And I would say find somebody you trust to watch your kids so you can be alone together. There's got to be somebody in your life that you trust to have them for a few hours, if not for a weekend. Or, like I said, the Linville saved us. My parents were around, so we got away for a week every year, pretty much, just the two of us. And
Yeah.
even if they go to grandparents and you stay home, that doesn't have to cost much.
Well, the creativity of,
Yeah.
you get our kids one week and then we'll take your kids the next week.
Yeah, you have friends that have little kids.
Yeah.
Try that. But, yeah,
That's great. I love that you guys emphasize the weekly or regular date night. That's something that saved our marriage and grown our marriage and made it even better year after year. So thank you so much. I want to pray for you guys. Before though we do that, are there any specific questions for Robbie or Joy that you guys might have based on what they've said, or something you know about them that you've always wanted to ask Robbie because he's on the hot seat?
Come on.
Any questions? Yeah.
I just have a comment. Hey, thanks for sharing the struggles that you guys, have dealt with your children, you sharing with your son about the struggles that he had there too, and that's neat. So we appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a transparent community, so we're grateful for that. Well, let me pray. Lord, thanks so much for Robbie and Joy, and thank you for their kids, for their family, for all that they do here at the church, for that muffin stand. Lord, for that muffin stand, we thank you. For all that Robbie does, Lord, for all that Joy does here at the church, their leadership, their example as a family, and their vulnerability today of being honest about where they're at, what's worked, what hasn't worked. Father, if nothing else, as Robbie has said, Lord, I pray that the couples that are here today would intentionally walk away with a date night, a regular date night, business meeting in mind, that they would get together and figure out schedules, figure out spiritual health, figure out romance, figure out all the things, Lord, that you're calling us to do as couples to grow our marriage and make it healthy and fill up those love tanks. So be with us for the rest of our time as we talk about what it looks like to get in these heated discussions and how we can reconcile that and do this biblically. And thank you so much for all that are here today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Well, today, as we promoted, we're talking about fighting fair. And Tonya and I were driving home yesterday from Florida. We have lots of examples of how not to fight fair.
Right.
In fact, she said to me, she said, "Do you think we should do an example of what it looks like to not fight fair, or was it an example of how to fight fair?" I can't remember.
It was both.
It was both.
But we had just had an argument, right? So it was timely. So we'll just use this one.
Yeah, that's right. You need to know, and as we've always tried to do, come on over here, sweetie, so we can get you on camera, because you're the best looking part of this thing. This is a marriage that has had its share of fights. We are a collection of the experiences that we've gathered as children, and now we're as adults trying to figure out how to navigate interpersonal relationships. And the last few weeks, I've been giving you these challenges of the timeline, the birth through death timeline, and some of you have asked, what is this, a psychology course, and what is this all about? And the reason why we're doing that, if I haven't been clear, is that because you are going to act, and you're going to speak, you're going to communicate, you're going to deal with crisis based on what you've gone through. If you haven't been able to figure that how to do it biblically, you're going to do it the way naturally you've been kind of created to do it. So,
or the way it's been modeled to you. I think so many times I just speak out of how my mom would have spoke without even thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just a default.
And so, Tonya grew up in a very different home than I did. And so, how did you catch fighting?
Yeah, well, my parents didn't do a lot of fighting around us. I think if they did conflict, it was behind closed doors. So I didn't really see a lot of that. So when my mom would respond to something that she didn't like about what my dad was deciding or doing, she would just, pull up her bootstraps and just keep going and maybe purse her lips, but that's the most that I would see happen. And so a lot of times that's my default. I just purse my lips and
The pursed lip, that was actually the code word.
that was so
Our
early
first couple
on.
years,
That's
I would just say
all I
pursed
knew.
lips.
Yeah, and I gave him permission to do that because I knew that I wanted to speak through things, and I knew I wanted to communicate well, but I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to, navigate through that conflict in a way that was going to get to the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so as she learned that, of course, I think I've been kind of clear with you guys that I learned the exact opposite of rather than keeping it in, how to explode. Volume up, I'm going to win this thing. You know, in fighting, oftentimes within the human nature, you know, someone brings a knife to a gunfight, and they think, oh, I'm going to win this thing, but the guy who they're fighting has a gun. So the next guy brings a rifle, and then the next guy brings a machine gun, the next guy brings a bazooka, then it's a tank, and then you got nuclear weapons involved. We as human beings want to amp up, and we want to beat the person we're fighting with. And so we figure out in our mind, even as children, we watch it with our kids all the time, what kind of techniques, tactics, manipulative ways can I use to be able to win this fight? It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. I just have to win. And I learned that at a young age.
And he's very good. He's very good at an argument. I'm terrible at an argument. So it would always feel at first like he was winning. He would always, you know, and I wouldn't always know in that heat of the moment, it would stress me out. And so I would kind of shut down instead of pushing through that. And
yeah, and I'm a patronizer, so I would, if I felt that I was losing, then I would patronize her, because I would use the techniques to be able to establish some kind of supremacy within the argument. Again, knowing, and I think I've shared this before, but anger for me is God's indicator that I'm wrong. You know, if you ever see me angry, just walk up to me and say, you're wrong. Because that's I know when I'm getting angry that I'm wrong, I'm guilty. I don't have a righteous anger. It's just all sinful with me. So today we want to talk about how to do it right, because some of you have done it wrong, and you've been doing it wrong, and it's really hurting your marriage. But before you do that, we want to do a quick question. If you haven't been in part of any of our polls here, you're just going to text that word poll, P-O-L-L, to that number. And once you do that, it's going to ask you, or it's going to tell you something, and this is the question we've got here. On a scale where 0 is bad and 10 is good, rate your ability to resolve conflict within your relationships. I'm talking now marital, even parental. Where are you at when it comes to the ability to be able to...
So a 9 or 10, just to clarify, would be that you're pretty good at resolving conflict.
Yeah, you're a rock star. Like, we've got some rock stars in the room. I'm going to...
And maybe can you give us an example of like what a 0? Maybe.
A 0 would be me. You just get defensive and you shut it down, or you walk out of the room, or you purse your lips. Okay?
Yeah.
Purse your lips. Or you just don't know how to interact with them without shutting down at some level. And that, every one of us has different techniques when it comes to the way that we fight. We've caught this rather than been taught this. And some of us were traumatized as children when it came to fighting because we watched our parents fight wrong, or because we were bullied before that was a word. And so we just learned not to even speak. And so we don't like conflict. Some of you, how many of you just don't like conflict at all? A lot of you are like, oh, no, I'm out of here. And you physically remove yourself, or mentally or emotionally remove yourself. So here in the room, we've got some fairly average people in regards to how we deal with conflict resolution. We've got one rock star or 2 rock stars, some people that are doing it well, some people that are, again, in the average, a few that are being honest today and saying, this is not good. You know, I don't do well here. And the question, of course, when you look at something like this is, well, why are we talking about fighting fair without spending a month or so talking about what healthy communication is? Well, it is backwards a little bit. But the reason why I'm doing this, or why we wanted to talk about this today, is because we know that often in our lives anyway, we're called into triage. You know, triage is where we find ourselves being pulled into. It's, you know, I'm going to leave him tomorrow, and I'm done with this marriage. I just found out the porn on the computer, or I found out she's cheating on me, and I'm out of here. And we got to figure out how to fight fair to get to a place where we can actually communicate. Because, again, knife, gun, rifle, bazooka, tank, nuclear weapons is the way we seem to escalate when it comes to the way we fight. And we have to figure out how to fight fair.
Well, and when we fight fair, there's a solution that happens. There's a compromise that happens. But when we leave it alone, or when we do it in a way that is hurting the other person, a lot of times you're not even really remembering what the fight was about in the first place.
Yeah.
Or what you were trying to solve in the first place. So as parents, when we're not just talking about marital conflict,
Yeah.
we're even talking about between our kids and how we're handling things between our kids as well in communication.
Absolutely, and we're hoping that today, some of the tools that we talk about give you ways that you can even parent differently when it comes to conflict resolution. Let's make sure that we get a baseline here, though, with God's Word. How many of you use this at your wedding? 1 Corinthians 13, it's the most popular, of course, wedding verse out there. And the good news is that it doesn't go old. It doesn't ever get stale. You don't take it off the shelf after a while. This needs to be a foundation for a healthy marriage. Just some of the words here. Patience, kindness. It's not about envy. It's not boasting and bragging. It's not proud. Well, what's the opposite of proud? Humble. Honey, will you forgive me? It doesn't dishonor others. It doesn't patronize. It doesn't say, name call or say something hurtful. It's not self-seeking, which of course arguments are very self-seeking. It's protection. I'm Russia, you're the U.S., and we're going to Cold War here on this one. It's not easily angered. That's an obvious one. It doesn't keep records of wrong. That's a huge one. It's a huge one because we say, I forgive you, but I really don't. Forgiveness is choosing not to remember. It doesn't go away, but you choose to say, no, that's reconciled. We're not going to bring that up in a future argument. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. And the truth, of course, isn't something that you and I can come up with. There's an architect of truth. His name is Jesus, and he defines truth. We just have opinions. Opinions don't equal truth. They can be based on truth, but ultimately it's still our skewed Canadian opinion. We have to figure out where's the truth in what I'm saying. So God's word is always sovereign over my opinion. It always protects. Wow. So I have to protect. She has to protect me. I have to protect her. Always trusts. Always hopes. Always perseveres. We're not going to give up. And then love never fails. Now, you look at this and you compare this to your last argument. And think about that last argument you had. That last heated discussion. You have one that last heated big discussion we had?
Technology.
Yeah. We're always having a technology discussion. So I am the parent that says, the kids can have some iPad time. And she's, of course, not. How would you define your thoughts on technology?
Well, never.
Never.
They just don't
They don't need it.
Go
Just move to Montana. And so, we're at the beach, and it's hurricane level winds, and the kids are inside playing PlayStation and iPads. And no, we're going to go out and we're going to stand in that windstorm.
You brought a kite, right?
You brought a kite. What's the number for the Coast Guard? Yeah, no, but for us, that's a challenge. Is how do we respect each other, hear each other, honor each other, especially in front of the kids. Yeah. Money's another big one. If you've done premarital counseling with us before you're married, marriage counseling for us is about how do you understand finances. That's been a big major one for me. Big time spender, big time saver. So we've had to figure out some pretty big ones. And so you guys all have yours too, what those would be about conflict resolution and conflict management. Another text that we love, and this is a scripture, of course, that talks a lot about listening, but this really is, I think, the foundation of fighting fair is saying, wow, I can actually hear you. Because this is mostly how people fight. They know what they want to say. I don't care what you have to say, but I'm going to tell you what I have to say.
Or we're thinking about what we're going to say next, as opposed to really hearing, right? What either our child is saying or what our spouse is saying.
Yeah. And I want to be very honest with you men. There have been times in these arguments, these discussions over the last 13 years we've been married, where I have been so angry that I've scared her. I've scared her with rage. I've scared her with an uncontrollability. I've scared her with she doesn't recognize who I am in that moment. And I'm sharing that as a transparent moment because I want you to know that fighting fair, or fighting unfair, I should say, is as evil as you can be in a marriage. Because there were times where she didn't know the stranger she was sitting across from. And there's nothing worse than that. That's abuse. That's a verbal abuse.
And this has been years.
Years ago. But
really-
I'm wanting to make sure that we understand that we're not just talking about a disagreement over what color of spatula we should buy. This is stuff where they're screaming, there's anger. In my first marriage, my ex-wife would throw things. So there was violence where she would throw things at me when she would get angry. And so I'm telling you all this because I want you to know we're really talking about the real stuff here. This isn't just a disagreement, Purdue, IU, we don't get along sometimes. That's not, no, I'm talking about just, it's all out hurt. It's filth. It's nuclear filth in the marriage. And Tonya came upon a website that we've put in your discussion guide for today that you can get to here in a little bit that I think is going to be a good next step for you if you want to talk further with your spouse on a date night about this. But I want you to walk through this because you got some really great tips that you've kind of unpacked that we're going to kind of share with the group here. So
Yeah, well, there were 25, and on the sheet there's way more than we had time, so we just picked out the ones that we feel like we really have tried over the years to get better at and improve on. Do you want to?
yeah, I'll put the first one up.
So the first one is just, and we did this really, really early on because my family we never called each other names. And so when that happened really early on in our marriage, I just said we're just not going to call each other names. That is just not going to be a part of our discussion.
And that, of course, opposite for me. An idiot, stupid. Are you dumb? Like, again, hurtful. Grenades. They weren't big enough. Like I wasn't going to call her something or say something to the kids that was so like devastating. It was just a grenade. It was supposed to shake it up, give me some victory points in my brain, and do enough damage that I could win. But there's just no place for name calling.
Right.
Again, why? Because God doesn't see us that way. God sees all of us as his beautiful, perfect child. And I say perfect, of course, in that he created us just the way he wanted to create us. Now, we do sin, but it's not up to us to say, I'm going to label you with a name or a hurtful statement or some kind of adjective.
Well, and in a marriage, if you're one with that other person, and you're pulling that other person down, who are you really pulling down, ultimately? Yourself. And so when you're pulling them down, in the process, you're creating all of these thorns that you're going to have to continue to walk over in your marriage. And same with your children. I mean, if we're pulling our children down and calling them names and telling them the negative things about them, right? Those are going to be the hard things that they're going to have to continue to limp through all their life instead of focusing on what is there, right? And what is good and what you can be thankful for. And
the world is going to do all that all the time for them anyway.
Right.
It's going to tell them they're never good enough.
Well, and the enemy.
And the enemy, sure. So our job as parents is to navigate building them up and filling up their love tanks. Of course, we still have to be honest and make sure that we're doing some character, formation in them. But the reality is we shouldn't be sabotaging it.
Right.
Let's go to the next one here.
So then the next one is just going straight to the issue. I don't know how many discussions you guys have had, but we've had a number where we veer big time, right? We start on what we think we're trying to work.
Why are the dishes always dirty?
Right.
Well, because you're never home. What do you mean I'm never home? I work hard for this family. Well, you hardly work. You're always on your computer. You see how that's...
Instead of saying...
It's not about the dishes anymore. Now it's about...
Right.
Would you mind on my computer.
Helping me with the dishes?
Yeah.
Or going right straight to the issue of, can we do something so that I have a little bit of help in the kitchen?
Mm-hmm.
Just right straight to it instead of, going right to, what we were talking about before, pulling down instead.
Then this is a big one. We have talked to a lot of you that when you fight, you start out with one major reason why you want to have a discussion, but you end up assassinating the other person with some other statement, hurtful, or some other reason, like we just said, dishes, computer, work, and then you sit down a day later and you can't remember what the original problem was you were trying to figure out.
You just remember that rageful feeling.
Yeah, you just remember that it escalated, and at the end, it was, you ran into your room and she ran into hers or whatever, and that was it. And what's helpful is to keep the main thing here, and maybe even write it down on a piece of paper, put it on the table so that that's what you're trying to resolve here.
And this was really a big deal for me early because I had stuffed a lot of my feelings just growing up. That was just how I learned to go at life. And so to resurrect some of those feelings and really teach myself, what am I really feeling right here? Instead of the resentment or the bitterness that was way down deep in those roots, like I had to really figure out, why am I upset right now? And he was really amazing to help me figure that out and to listen and ask good questions along the way. But for those of you that conflict is hard, this is probably going to be that same kind of thing. What am I really upset about? If I'm taking this all the way down that rabbit trail, what am I really upset about right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And listen actively and respectfully. You know, body language is huge on this one. Rolling our eyes, just doing something else as we're talking. I'm the queen of, you know, going to do dishes as we're in the middle of a conversation just because of my frustration, but really staying in it and listening well, not just to prepare your argument for, you know, what's going to be said next. Or,
Yeah, listening actively means I'm actually hearing what you're saying,
right.
so that I can understand it better, not so that I can disagree with it better.
Right. So this next one is really funny, actually. This is something that Clinton brought in really early on. I don't know, was it a marriage conference?
Oh, I don't know, we still
I can't remember, but anyways, just being able to clarify what the other person is saying and what I hear you saying is, and then trying to repeat back to them. And it's hilarious the first few times that we tried to do this. We had to go back and forth like 8 times because I did not
Because you want to sabotage
it.
So what I hear you saying is you want me to pick up my socks because you want to terrorize my life. No, I'm not saying I want to terrorize your life. So you want to sabotage it, but you're really not. This is again where the active listening comes in. And again, we've done this with many of you in this room, and you've had to go through the painfulness of wanting to taint what you're really hearing. When you're not hearing that, like your spouse is not saying that, but you think they're really saying that.
This is where the luggage, right, from our past discussions
Yeah.
comes in, where we bring along the things that were said either about us or, you know.
Yeah. Give an example.
Yes, yeah.
She will say to me, it hurts me when you don't spend time with me, okay? What I hear her saying is, you're a failure as a dad and as a father, as a husband. Well, wait a minute. How did I just leap the Grand Canyon from, well, it's because of my trauma points that we talked about a few weeks ago. So I have to say, no, wait a minute, that's not what you're saying at all. You just want me to spend more time at home this week. I get it. And so this active listening, or what I hear you saying is, it can be juvenile, and it does get humorous as you have to do it 6 and 7 times back and forth to get it right. But
when he can say perfectly, like what I just said to him, I feel so heard. And I, like, no matter what we're in the middle of, if I feel heard, like, okay, we're gonna get to the other side of this. Like, because I feel valued, I feel appreciated, I feel respected, and I feel like he wants to know me to the core instead of just brushing me to the side.
And the Holy Spirit changes my heart as I repeat back to her what she's truly saying.
Right.
And then I humble myself to say, well, will you forgive me, sweetie? I hadn't
That's nice.
thought about that. Oh,
Good idea. No, that's after this one.
okay. Make an effort to see the situation through their eyes.
Yeah, so just being empathetic to what they might be feeling, be empathetic to their past. You know, I'm a lot of times mindful of what his dad might have told him or taught him early on. But yeah, I think just trying to really take what I hear you saying and really take that to heart, not just let that be words out of your mouth, but really, oh, this is what he's feeling. This is what these are the insecurities that he's feeling.
And this is really important when we're talking about our children, because to them, this is huge. You know, the fact that they're Lego is now all over the house because their sister did that is the worst thing ever. And so to be able to look at it through their eyes, and of course not to start crying with them because it's so devastating, but to say, I understand now why you're so upset. That must really hurt to feel that way. Are you hurt because your Lego is in every part of this house? Okay, well let's figure out how we can get all that Lego back in this box, right? So it really validates them that you hear them, and it validates the fact that you're seeing it through their eyes. And dads, that 12-year-old, when she comes home and are heartbroken because she dated a boy from 3 o'clock till 5 o'clock p.m. and they broke up over texting, you're just going to have to realize that to your little girl, that's the closest she's come to love, even though she doesn't know the guy's name. You know, that's don't patronize, don't make her feel bad. Just say, oh, so what I hear you saying is that it really hurt you when he texted you and said, "Who's this?" That sounds hard. We laugh now. Yeah, we laugh now. I'm gonna get this in triplicate. Okay. That's it.
Don't manipulate or stir anger intentionally. I think I was really guilty of that early on as well. Knowing that he was upset about something and continuing on instead of backing away and maybe saying a prayer. I know Shelby has always challenged me in that too, just being prayerful of the situation even before you walk into that conversation.
Yeah.
Manipulate, do you want to talk about
Yeah, manipulation is a big word, right? And I don't want to generalize here, but sometimes if we've learned that we can say something or do something that causes our spouse to feel bad, we might go there right away. So, as an example, I know some wives that, like, in order to gain control, they just start crying. Now, what I want to be very clear about here is if your wife is crying, that's always a sign that husbands, you need to pay attention and figure out what it is you've done to ask for forgiveness for. But if you're a wife who cries just to be able to control the situation rather than get to some kind of an understanding of how to both be able to reconcile it, then that's called manipulation, right? And sometimes we can just manipulate. You know, men, we manipulate sometimes, again, by, well, you know how much I do for this family, I work hard, you know. We try to manipulate rather than really understand. And so this is a big one in regards to the way that we can look at coming in neutral rather than coming in with some kind of negative tool.
I feel, fill in the blank, when, fill in the blank kind of statements are really good. This makes sure that you are not throwing those grenades that Clinton was talking about earlier, that you're kind of staying on track to truly what you're feeling and giving that scenario as to when you feel that way.
Absolutely. We keep going?
Well, okay, are we in?
Want to make sure we fly through this, because we want to give this some time here.
And this can sometimes happen, sometimes it can't, but try and lighten up when you can. Sometimes the situation.
This isn't mockery.
not-
Don't mock to get a
Right,
joke going.
right.
But
And sometimes you can just, there are things that you can laugh at and just say, this is ridiculous.
can you
that we're
believe
talking
we
about
are
this,"
fighting
but-
over the garbage?
Right. And so sometimes this will work, but only when both are able to laugh about it. When one is laughing,
Hilarious!
it's not funny to the other person. But it does, sometimes it just helps. It's good to have a sense of humor in all things.
Yeah. This
And-
is a big one for a
yeah.
lot of you.
Don't walk away without resolving or reconciling. This was something that a habit that I had no idea, but when I would feel conflict early on, I would leave the room. I would go do dishes. I would go and just do something else because I didn't want to be in the middle of that conflict. I didn't want to be yelled at. I didn't want that. So I would find something else productive to do, and instead of staying in it and trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to, bring this volume down and work through it. And
Some of you have been given this advice that you shouldn't go to bed on your anger. You shouldn't let the night pass. And this is kind of in that vein. It's like, no, we're going to deal with this. Now, you might be someone who needs a couple minutes to cool down, but the deal is you're going to come up with an agreement that we're going to meet back here in 10 minutes to talk about this because I'm hot, or you're upset, or whatever, but we're going to agree that we're going to deal with this rather than retreat, because sometimes emotional retreat or physical retreat is another technique that's being used to make sure that the conversation gets won, so to speak.
And when we do fight in front of our kids, we really try hard to also resolve in front of them so that they see me saying, will you forgive me, Clinton, for, you know, so that they see that, you know, it's not just us fighting, but it's also us repenting and choosing the right way at the end.
And this has been beautiful. This is, of course, the most important part of a discussion, is that, will you forgive me for what I said and saying it? Will you forgive me for saying that we should go, you know, it's dumb to go out in the windstorm on the beach. Yes, I will forgive you for saying that. Our children have so caught this principle that if we don't reconcile quickly, they make us reconcile. They say, Dad, you need to ask Mom for forgiveness for saying that. Or Mom, you need to ask Dad for forgiveness. And that's, again, a really wonderful thing to see your kids kind of pick up. And then you watch them also, and they, of course, ad nauseum have to seek forgiveness from each other.
Well,
because
and
of
forgiveness is not an option in our family. We expect it, and it will happen, and it will happen quickly.
Not I'm sorry,
Right,
because sorry is Greek for I'll do it again.
yeah.
But forgiveness is I owe you a debt,
Right.
and I've got to figure this thing out.
And we talked last time about even if it's, you know, 10% his fault, he always still steps forward with his 10%, even if my 90% has not yet been spoken to say, will you forgive me? So a lot of times he will lead, and when he, you know, owns his spec, my log, you know, is a lot easier to own and say, will you forgive me?
Yeah, and I want to speak to, sorry, go ahead, Joy.
One thing about the will you forgive me, if you've ever done that to somebody who doesn't know this, they are shocked. Last year when we were playing volleyball at Canterbury, I yelled at the line judge, not very nice. And after the match, I went over and I just stood there and I said, I need to apologize. Will you please forgive me for the way I talked to you? That was wrong of me. I hope you will forgive me. And she stood there like, I didn't walk over and say, I'm sorry. You know, I actually told her what I did wrong and that I was wrong and asked her for forgiveness. And it's a shock to somebody who doesn't know this, you know, and it's good. It was good for her to see an adult come to a kid and ask for forgiveness. So
That's
It's
very
a whole
good.
new
and
level of-
her face changed.
Yeah.
She smiled and she goes, "Oh yeah, that's okay." You know, it was, you know, but just somebody who isn't used to that, it's really good example for them too.
A husband, we were working with a couple, and the husband was doing some things that was hurting his wife, and she confessed this in front of him, and he took it and folded his arms and yada, yada, yada. And I kept talking to him about how he needs to seek forgiveness for what he's done to his wife. And he didn't do it there, but I guess later on that night, he did say it to her in front of his kids. And, you know, she just melted. She was so blessed by it. And their entire marriage had never asked for forgiveness. And but later on, he came at me and was like, you know what? We're sitting there, and you're just beating me up. Like, what are you kind of beating me up? You know what she does, what she does, what she does? I'm like, dude, you're the leader of the home. You know, we fire the CEO when a company does poorly. We don't fire the custodian. You know, you're the leader. You've got to seek forgiveness first and watch how the Lord uses that humility to translate into your wife's heart, your children's heart, now that they too will seek forgiveness. It can't be a scoreboard where you're waiting for them to do it first. You've got to do it first. You're the man. You're the leader. And it's been so transformational in their marriage that he's figured out, if I only have 1% responsibility in this, I'm still going to seek forgiveness first and watch how that just domino effects in the rest of their lives. This is a hard one, though. We want to give some discussion. You had a question?
Yeah, I have a question about specifically teaching your kids to forgive.
Yeah.
We do this in our house, and our kids are wonderful. But my concern, my other thought is that, because with our kids, you know, no matter what is done, no matter what is said, no matter what happens, and as soon as somebody apologizes or asks forgiveness, their response is automatic. It's okay, I forgive you. It's okay. And it's almost so automatic that it's without thought.
Yeah.
But my concern is, are we training them for later in life, if they get older, they get out into the world, somebody tries to take advantage of them. And where do you set the stage to establish healthy boundaries for, when they need to, there's a point.
Yeah, no, there is, yeah.
They need to have some boundaries.
There is boundaries and understanding that there's gotta be justice too.
Yeah.
One thing I'll back up is that next time you observe your kids doing the flippant, yeah, I forgive you, say, well, what are you forgiving them for? And have them repeat back what they're forgiving and find out if they actually are hearing what the person's seeking forgiveness for. Because with our kids, we have to make sure that they understand what the infraction is and what they've forgiven. Because they might be selling the farm and they don't know what they're selling the farm on. Do you really forgive them for that? But secondly, and that's a totally another discussion, is how to have an assertive communication with someone who's taking advantage of you. We have one of our daughters is constantly being verbally beaten up by a friend at school. And we're trying to teach her how to stand up for truth in love. Not be hurtful, but to say, her friend, when you speak to me that way, it really hurts me, and I don't think I can be with you right now because you're constantly hurting me. So I'm going to take some time and be away for a while. Hard for her to do that, but we got to teach that too, and that's another class altogether, but I love it. Absolutely love it. The discussion sheets are online if you want to grab them by texting the word talk. So sorry that we went a little over time, but break into your groups and share as much as you can before we leave here today. Again, remember next week, Easter not meeting. Following week, we will be meeting, and hopefully we'll be back in the chapel. But jump into your discussion groups now if you could, and finish off the morning together.